And then as you land in this seated posture, let's take our palms and place them down on our legs, however we have the legs positioned. And then with an exhale, let's just turn our chin over towards the right. And then when you get here, just move the chin up and down. Think about maybe like a half inch of total movement. Just trying to play with a little of this lateral neck tissue. And then we'll bring our head back to neutral. Re-land. And then once an exhale, let's head over to the second side, the left side. We land in the rotation. And then we're just going to give this like a little subtle nod. Just try to minimize the movement or maintain the movement around a half inch. And then we'll bring our chin back to neutral when you feel balanced. Keep the palm down on the right side, but take the left hand and just let it find the mat somewhere. If you do feel like you're not reaching the mat, maybe a little blanket prop to give yourself a little bit of elevation so that we don't have to tilt. And then we're gonna press down with that right hand and rotate the left shoulder and chin this time. And then once you get into that full rotation, we're gonna again offer that little chin movement. Maybe you want to take it up to an inch or so. Doesn't have to be, but maybe you want to extend that movement a little bit. And then we'll inhale back to neutral. Settle here. Land in your seat. Anchor that left hand. Right hand finds the mat. When it feels appropriate, pushing down into the left hand to help rotate towards that right shoulder. When you get into the full rotation, we'll do that little chin movement. Just a little up and down movement. Trying to expand kind of that lateral line work. And then when you feel balanced, coming back to neutral. Take an inhale breath and try to think about from the base of the spine all the way through the crown of the head, extending upward towards the sky or ceiling. And then lock it in a little bit with a little core engagement, right? In restorative class, so we're not really cranking into the abdominals, but try to lock that in a little bit. And then see if you can release your hands behind you and interlace the fingers with all of this torso length. And then we'll lift the chin towards the ceiling. And as the chin lifts, keep trying to draw inhale breaths that elevate the entirety of the spine. So we're trying to pull that lumbar extension out of the shape. Belly's not going forward, crown of the head is going upward. I guess chin is now going upward. And then we'll release back to neutral. And flip your palms over so the palms can face towards the ceiling or sky. And then exhale and let the chin tuck to the sternum. So the chin tucks to the sternum. Think about broadening out through the collarbone. And then we'll inhale our head back to neutral. And let's just move the shoulders here. Just a little shoulder rotation. Pick a direction and just start to rotate. Palms ideally are up here, but if down is the only way that your shoulders feel comfortable in that rotation, allow for that internal rotation. Ideally, we have palms up with some external rotation. So some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but a long time ago, I was a sophomore or junior in college. I spent a semester studying the Newfoundland cod fishing industry. And let's reverse the direction of our shoulders. In the 14 and 1500s, cod fishing around Newfoundland was described as so easy that you could just dip into the water and pull out cod anywhere, everywhere. And let's relax. Maybe let the eyes close here. Let's take maybe just like 15 seconds to just feel the torso, how we've expanded, how we've shifted, how we've tweaked the torso. When it feels appropriate for you, let's extend our legs out in front of us so we end up in a little staff. Think about the femoral direction and try to get the legs so that they're running parallel with one another, but also running perpendicular straight up to the ceiling or sky. So there's no rotation, there's no kind of external fault here. We're really integrated and aligned. And then let's keep that spinal length and just follow it forward into a little fold. And so in the 14 and 1500s, a lot of the fishing was done with just lines, just small boats thrown out, lines. And that, generally evolved into nets, again, in relatively small boats. And that progressed to kind of larger boats and larger nets. And then in the 1950s, things started to change. These things called trawlers were introduced. Trawlers were these relatively massive vessels that fished in a different way. It's called dredging. Remember that we're continually trying to find space through the utilization of our breath here. Dredging and trawlers change things dramatically in that we'll bring ourselves back up towards staff, and then let's bend our left knee and let the left knee fall out wide. First thing we're gonna do is rotate the belly button towards that right thigh and just follow that straight out into a fold. So a little asymmetrical fold here. Try to keep the shoulders so that they are balanced in their distance to the floor or mat. Trawlers kind of used a net in a way, but instead of kind of precision dropping a net into a school of cod, fishermen would now just drop a net that ran essentially from the boat to the bottom of the ocean. And everything from the bottom of the ocean up would be dredged. This was an incredibly effective way to catch cod. but it was an incredibly wasteful way to catch cod as well. It essentially wiped the sea of life in the area that was dredged. And due to this, by the 1980s, the cod industry was collapsing. Cod populations were decimated. And a lot of cod fishermen had gone out of business and were pining for the days of old, the days of plentiful cod, smaller boats. Let's bring ourselves back up into a asymmetrical staff here, a little modified staff. We still have that left knee turned out wide. We're going to turn our torso now towards the left thigh. The goal is to get that belly button to run down kind of this inner edge of the thigh, and then we're going to take ourselves out into a fold here. We want this right leg to stay integrated. So the toes are pointed straight up towards the ceiling or sky. And then the right shoulder, right, it's easy to just dump into the left. We're trying to bring the right shoulder so that the right and left shoulder are parallel, so that we're bringing some twist. We want to feel this along the kind of QL musculature on the right side of the spinal column. Great time for me to note, right? This can be kickstand, this can be elbow stand, this can be forehead to the ground. The key is we need to have the flexibility on that right side of our spine. Probably obvious, but just as a constant reminder, if you're restricted in the hamstring, if you're feeling this all in that right hamstring, bend that right knee and allow for more room so that we can drift the kind of impact up into the lumbar. Give ourselves 20 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we'll walk ourselves back up towards vertical, extend that left leg to mirror the right, and just kind of feel into the symmetry or asymmetry of the back's opening. Continue to feel that as you take yourself out to a traditional forward fold. See if you can pick up on any variance between the right and left side of the body here. So a lot of these fishermen wish that they could go back to before the 1950s, before the 1960s, when these trawlers became more and more a part of the industry. And yet the subject of today's story remembers things a little bit differently. He was born in Newfoundland in the early 1920s. by the mid 1930s, he was already helping his father on their small little fishing boat. And it feels appropriate. Let's walk ourselves back up into staff. We're going to bend the right knee and let that fall out wide. And then we'll turn our torso so that it faces the middle of that left thigh, and we'll release ourselves down into this fold. So one of the things people don't really think about when they think about cod fishing, if they think about cod fishing, probably a lot of people spend less time thinking about cod fishing than I do. Cod live in Arctic waters, cold, deep ocean waters. And cold, deep ocean waters are kind of notorious among fishermen for one thing. That is giant waves. 20, 30, 40-foot waves are commonplace. Part of the business, part of the experience. And this young little 15-year-old boy hated those waves. Hated being out at sea when his father's boat was being tossed around. Would be terrified when they're out on the deck pulling in the nets. Last 20 seconds here. And it feels appropriate. Let's walk ourselves up into staff. We'll turn our torso towards our right thigh and make our way into that fold. Remember the key here, we want that right leg to be engaged. The toes pointed straight up. We want the shoulders to be at a balanced, equal distance from the floor mat. And we want to feel this expansiveness up this left side of our low back, our lumbar spine. Quadris labora musculature. And this musculature that helps support and stabilize the entire length of the spine. Give ourselves about 15 more seconds here. If it feels appropriate, we'll bring ourselves back up. We extend that right leg, and one last time, we're going to follow that forward into a fold. Ideally, we've crafted some more space here for our fold. We can find our way into that. So when this young man was given his father's cod fishing boat, his father's cod fishing industry, business, on his 20th birthday, he was grateful, but he wasn't exactly thrilled. He hired a few crew members, but he made a vow to himself and his crew that he would always take into account the waves, the weather patterns, before taking his boat out. Give ourselves 30 more seconds here. One more big full inhale. And deep releasing exhale, finding every last bit of available space. We walk ourselves back up into staff and then lower ourselves onto our spine, making sure we have those blankets or towels handy. And then as we come out of that long forward folding sequence, just find your way onto your back and let your spine relax. Notice what areas of the back or body are speaking the loudest here. Really paying attention to where you feel expansive and where you feel restrictive. And then eventually, we're going to bring our knees into a bent position so the kneecaps can point towards the ceiling. And we're going to grab our blanket, and from shelf fold, we're just going to take that in half and then maybe in half again, not necessarily in half again. We're looking to create something like a block that can come between our knees. And for a moment, we're just going to give like 10 to 15% pressure into that blanket or block. and just see what the lumbar does with that little bit of musculature activity. Sometimes you get a pop out of some of that structure. We're still stuck in the lumbar. Be fairly unlikely coming out of so much lengthening, but just in case there's anything left. And then we're going to take our second blanket. And again, from shelf fold, we're just going to hot dog fold that. So we end up with something like this. Place that to the left side of our hips. And then with an exhale, just let both knees fall over to the left so that you are supported by the blanket underneath you. And make sure that you're really well positioned so that the knees can be stacked here so that we have this prop keeping roughly 2 fist distance between the thighs. And then think about relaxing into that right shoulder. This is about continuing that lumbar expansion, wrapping around a little more into the lateral edge, the right side here. You can roll all the way onto that left hip if that feels accessible for you. Really being connected to your breath, thinking about where you want the cervical rotation. So rotating the head to the right deepens the full rotation of the spine. To the left will soften, and towards the ceiling or sky will just bring a little neutral intensity to the rotation. On the first day of his captainship, the weather was predicted to be horrendous. And of course, the reports had been that the odd were incredibly plentiful. Remember, this was before 40s, 50s, and 60s when dredging came along. So the reports were that it was just an incredible season. And yet he stayed true to his word. He kept his boat in harbor. And as the other boats headed out under the darkness of morning, he watched. Sure enough, they came back with full cargo hulls and tales of incredible danger. There were rumored to be waves 50, 60 feet tall. These little boats were getting tossed around. Last 30 seconds here. When it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our knees back to neutral. Pedal into your spine here. And then when you're ready, let's take our hot dog blanket over to the right side. And we'll let the knees fall over to the right. Remembering that you can stack your hips here. We want that 2-fist distance between the thighs. We want the left shoulder to be anchored. And we just want to continue to soften here. Head can be to the right, to neutral, or to the left, depending on what feels most impactful for you, feels most beneficial for you. Next morning, the weather reports were slightly worse. So this fisherman made the decision again to stay in harbor. As the other small fishing boats headed out into the Arctic Sea, you could see them bobbing up and down on these swells as they left, and he knew as they got further and further away from land, the thrashing of the ocean would become more and more intense. And sure enough, when they came back that night, they had horror stories about how terribly rough the ocean waters were. How the waves were battering them around, how they were flipping, how there were many near catastrophic events. And yet they all came back with overflowing cargo holds. rest of those 30 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees back to neutral. Align the length of your spine, and let's take the blanket out from in between our knees. Here, we're going to want to really make sure that we get a good approximation of a block. So something that has a side, two sides really, but one side with the fold that really has a nice consistent density across it. And then let's use that as our kind of sacral balance here. We're going to bend both knees if they're not already bent, kneecaps point towards the ceiling, lift ourselves up into a bridge and slide that prop underneath us. The goal here is to use the density of that folded towel or blanket to create a little elevated supported bridge. So you really need to pay attention to where that density kind of bandwidth is. If you are too far to the edge and you lose the stability, then the body just kind of sinks over the approximation of the block. If you're too high, then we really lose the sacral movement. So we're trying to find the place where we have a balance of stability and capacity for sacral adjustment here. And then we're just going to relax. We're going to let our body just absorb what we've offered it thus far. It turns out the weather in this first week of captainship for this young captain was horrendous every day. And he made the same decision every day to stay ashore while others pushed out into these massive waves. And people started to ask him, what was wrong? Is there something that needed to be worked on in the boat? Like he's missing out on these tremendous fishing opportunities. And he just very calmly explained to them, he's waiting for the day when the Waters are a little more calm. When the sea's a little more friendly. And the waves won't toss him and his crew around dangerously. Give ourselves 60 more seconds here. It feels appropriate for you. Let's lift our belt line high enough to slide our prop out from underneath us. And set that to the side. Let the spine come back down to the mat where we just land and receive. You want to move that second blanket. Oh, now's a nice opportunity to do that. Give yourself these cycles of breath to feel the lumbar kind of in particularly reintegrating with the neutrality of the mat. And then when it feels appropriate, let's start a little dynamic sway. So we start to move the knees back and forth into some dynamic twists. Really just feeling your body's capacity to move here. Really gentle in your exploration, but trying to get into what is available. Not overextending, just feeling what's there. Maybe one more time in each direction. Eventually, when it feels appropriate, knees back to neutral. And just observing the body once again. Asking yourself if there's anything that you want, anything that you need, anything that you would benefit from prior to finding stillness. When it feels appropriate, let's just drift into our version of stillness this morning, our version of Shavasana. As luck would have it, The first year of this new captainship was plagued with horrendous weather. And so he kept his boat, his crew in harbor. The other cod fishermen went out and ended up with what turned out to be a record year. Drifting towards your version of stillness. That first season ended up being pretty much a disaster. As the cod population started to diminish, and the technology in the cod industry started to expand. This fisherman was one of the first to go away. We'll start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes. To our wrists. Ankles. Elbows. Knees. Shoulders. Hips. Neck. Head. Jaw. And tongue. Eventually, the entirety of the body moves. And utilize that movement to transition our way into a seat. In this seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And with your next inhale, let's bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that it is not life's waves that are the problem? It is the expectation that someday they won't be there that can really lead you astray. And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Love the heck out of you. Cannot tell you how much I appreciate you. Have a beautiful day. I will be back tomorrow if you want to move. If I don't see you then, have a beautiful week. If I see you soon. Bye.